Okay, so as I've been introduced, I'm Emily Pascoe and I'm a postdoc at Wageningen University. I'm actually in the One Health entomology group in the laboratory of entomology. So I hopefully will be able to give you a bit of an understanding of what the One Health concept is and the kind of approaches that can be used in research and in other ways that it can be implemented. So the One Health concept isn't exactly new, but it didn't really kind of pick up and gain momentum until more recently in the early 2000s, when people started to look around them and realize that there was a big increase in the last century or so of outbreaks of zoonotic diseases. And zoonotic diseases are those that are caused by pathogens that generally are found in animals, and that can be wildlife, but also domestic animals, which then spill over and cause disease in humans. And so with this image here, I just wanted to give an overview of how widespread across the world these outbreaks have been, and the general time frame that they have been most active, and also the kinds of animals that may be responsible or in some way involved in those cycles. So here we can see that animal and human health is very much linked. But as I said, it was mainly in the last century that people really noticed that this was an issue. And there are a number of reasons why that is, but here are some of them that were perhaps most impactful. So we started to see changes in the environment caused by us, but also changes in the way that we interacted and used the environment. So we started to travel more due to changes in technology for transportation. There was greater global trade, climate change, thanks to increase in recreational activities. We were starting to encroach on habitat of vectors, and that was also related to land use change as well, how we were changing a lot of natural habitat into farmland or other recreational areas as well. So now we see that not only are human and animal health very closely linked, but that the environment very much influences how linked that they can be. So the One Health concept basically acknowledges that the human, animal, and environmental health are interconnected, and that we need to really acknowledge that and work on that to be able to take care of any one of these three things. And so it takes a collaborative and interdisciplinary approach to make sure that each of these three sections of the One Health are taken into account in order to provide optimal health at the regional, national, and global level for humans, but also for animals and the environment. So like I said, it's not a new concept. People have known about the One Health concept for a really long time, particularly the link between human and animal health. But when it was not until 2004 that it was kind of formally formulated and acknowledged as a way of implementing research or the way that we live our lives. And that was during the Wildlife Conservation Society Symposium, which was called the One World, One Health Symposium. And that's when people really started to think about ways that we could start to use the One Health idea. And then that really took on momentum during the early 2000s because a number of zoonotic outbreaks occurred. In particular, the avian influenza outbreak really made people realize that what was happening with birds and how that was potentially going to spill over into humans, and how that was related to environmental changes and the way we use the environment, that the One Health approach was really necessary to be able to deal with these kinds of outbreaks. And since then, we've really seen like a huge increase and interest in the number of organizations and labs and consortiums that are taking on a One Health approach. So that's really promising. But what exactly do these One Health institutes or labs do? Well, there is no one way to define exactly what One Health should do or what it is. During the conference in 2004, organized by the One World, One Health conference, they came up with 12 Manhattan Principles, which was basically a list of 12 aims that they thought were important. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just wanted to go through some that were particularly interesting or meaningful. So obviously the first one was to recognize the link between human, domestic animal and wildlife health. So also acknowledging that the way that we interact with domestic animals and wildlife is very different, and so the risks and the way that we should deal with them should also differ. We should recognize that human health can contribute to conservation. So the idea that by taking care of humans, we can also indirectly take care of other animal species, particularly those that are, for example, endangered. We need to recognize that changes to the environment have implications for health. So when we change the way that we use the land, or if we drain land, for example, for agriculture, that's going to have a knock-on effect on the health of us and also the animals around us, and those two things are also linked. And one of the other aims that was within these 12 Manhattan Principles was to invest in education and raising awareness. More recently, people have realized that we also need to take account political and societal factors. So not just treating all humans as a single species, but realizing that we also have to really invest in making sure that we make things equitable, inclusive, and accessible. And there is also a lot of push to really make sure that One Health concept is really applied. So this involves the theory of the 4 Cs from a paper that was published very recently, that we need to communicate, collaborate, coordinate, and build capacity to really be able to make the One Health concept applicable instead of just a nice idea for research or the way that we present things. So, okay, then now we've talked about what One Health is, how do we actually apply it as an approach? The scope is really huge. So it's not just that it can be performing research out in the field or in a lab or in a clinic. It's also able to inform like how we use land, occupational health risks, water and food safety and security, to name just a few. But the main idea and concept is that it should take a holistic and interdisciplinary approach, and that we should inform and involve relevant stakeholders so that we are able to make it applicable. And the idea is that there is not one single person or organization or group that is able to do this alone, that it really should be a collaborative effort with people from all different sectors to be able to make it truly a One Health approach. So just now to give like a more personal example of the One Health research, because there are so many ways that it can be applied, maybe one example would be helpful. I personally study the ecology of ticks and tick-borne pathogens, which by its nature is kind of quite relevant to One Health because I look at how ticks interact with humans, but also wildlife, and how within those interactions that can cause the transmission of pathogens between the two, and also how environmental changes or types of environment, like different forest habitats, maybe make those interactions more or less frequent. But there are other ways that even if your research is not necessarily a One Health topic, that you can at least apply a One Health approach. For example, in the past, I've collaborated with foresters and firefighters, as well as vets and human health professionals, to get their insight and also their knowledge on the types of research that I've been doing, and see how they find the results applicable, so that I'm not just looking at it from my side, my point of view. I also involve the Stadsbosbeheer and other landowners where I perform my research to make sure that they understand the results and then are able to implement them or apply them as they see fit. For example, if I see a lot of ticks in one area, I can inform them, and then they can understand if it's worth to put signs up to inform people that maybe they need to take extra care of ticks. So it's not just that I'm doing my research for myself, I'm doing it so that it can be applied for people and who are using the environment that I'm studying. And finally, I also try to produce educational materials again, so that we can really apply the One Health approach and not just keep it amongst ourselves. And yeah, that is what I would like to share with you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emily. And I think it was a very inspiring presentation to hear the One Health concept. And yeah, for me also interesting to hear, and especially also the awareness raising part. I think that is great that we are doing that here now today too. Yeah, so I wonder, does anyone have any questions for Emily? I can start with a question. I know that some people in the school and also IPSF will attend the climate conference next week in Egypt. And I was wondering how the One Health concept links to climate change. Is there any interlinkages with that? Because you're also talking about the environmental health, but also the human health in that sense. So I was wondering if you have any reflections on that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the idea is that we can't be healthy without the environment being healthy. And I guess by that they mean that the ecosystems are functioning well, and that we're considering how the environment affects human health. That can also be in terms of mental health, so providing opportunities to be able to use outdoors to better our mental health. But also thinking about how the environment at the same time can cause a risk for our health. For example, if we're encroaching on wildlife habitat, and then that gives us a risk for contact with zoonotic pathogens. But yeah, if the ecosystem is not functioning well, then that gives risk of spillover and risk of illness in wildlife, which then also affects us. So the full loop.
I see. Thank you for your answer. I don't know if there are any questions, but otherwise you can maybe put them in the chat so Emily can read them later. Yeah, then I want to move on to the next speaker. Thanks a lot for joining, Emily, and feel free to stay in this call to also hear about the work of your colleagues Rodi and Kiki. Now up is Kiki Strang from Wageningen University with her PhD on the surveillance of arboviruses in livestock and other domestic and wild animals in the Netherlands. Kiki, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll try to share my screen. Let's see. Can you see this?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so thank you for the invitation to present something on my PhD project. I'll shortly introduce myself. I'm Kiki Streng. I'm a veterinarian, so I did my veterinary training in the Netherlands, in Utrecht. And afterwards, I worked in practice as a vet for equine and small animals. And then I came across the opportunity to start a PhD project on arbovirus surveillance, and I'll explain in this presentation what this is and how this links with the One Health concept. Check if I can. Yes. So I will give a short introduction to the One Health Pact Consortium, of which my PhD is a part. And I'll talk about arboviruses and how they link to domestic animals, but also wildlife and other animals. What veterinary surveillance methods we use to track these viruses, and then show some examples of what I'm doing in my PhD project, so you can get an idea of what I do on a daily basis and how this links to One Health. So about our consortium, it's called the One Health Pact Consortium, and in PACT stands for Predicting Arbovirus Climate Tipping Points. We are with 26 PhD candidates and a postdoc from 5 universities in the Netherlands, and working all on the same topic, but from a lot of different angles. So we focus on vector-borne diseases, which are also sometimes called arthropod-borne diseases, in short, arboviruses in this case, because we focus on viruses. And our consortium looks at different change scenarios. So it links to your question about climate change. So we look at changes in climate, water management, farming practices, and risk of importation of these viruses and vectors, and what risks that would bring to the Netherlands, because our focus is mainly on the Netherlands, but also on some other European countries. And on the right, you can see a figure that was made when acquiring the funding for this whole consortium, looking at all the different topics that are connected with this virus circulation. So as Emily just explained, we have changes in the human side, such as population growth, mobility and transport, that are linked with the environment, but also with animals. So my PhD is mainly focused on the animal part in this whole circle, so to say. And our consortium is built up in 4 pillars. And personally, I'm in pillar A. So the pillars are ecosystem mapping. Then there's a pillar forecasting and early detection, impact and severity assessment, and interventions. So the focus of the pillar that I'm in is to generate data on density and movement of animals and vectors, and generate data on arbovirus circulation in these animals, and to work on surveillance networks across these animal species. So just to give you an idea of what people are working on in this pillar, the first one is Rody, so he's I'm not going to explain what he's doing, because he's going to do that himself. But there's people working on wildlife surveillance, so mainly in birds and rodents. There's quite a lot of people working on birds, actually. So bird migration, impact of these viruses on birds, risk maps, humans as sentinels, because humans can also bring in diseases or can get sick when they get infected with an arbovirus, education and schools. And my project is thus focused on mainly on domestic animals. So how do these animals link to this research topic? Well, Emily shortly explained that, for example, tick-borne diseases are very a good idea to look at the One Health concept, because you have the vectors that are affected by environmental changes. Then in this case, on the left, you can see the transmission cycle for tick-borne encephalitis virus. They can infect rodents, that again can infect ticks, that can infect mammals and birds, and via, for example, dairy products or via direct tick bites, humans can also get infected. So in this way, you can see how this human-animal environment all links together. The same goes for example, Rift Valley fever virus, which is present mainly in Africa. And they all have kind of similar cycles, but in this case, the vector is a mosquito, and domestic ruminants can be an amplifier for the virus, and can also again infect humans via contact with blood, for example. So some examples that I'm especially interested in, West Nile virus mainly because it was recently introduced into the Netherlands. So that's one of the viruses that we focus on. And this is actually maintained in a cycle between birds, mainly wild birds, and mosquitoes. But these mosquitoes can also infect horses and humans. In most cases, horses and humans don't really get sick when they get infected, but in some cases, they may show symptoms. So how we use these animals is to make sure that we can spot where the virus is circulating. So if, for example, veterinarians see that there's horses with neurological cases, they report that. And in this way, we may be able to track the virus. But there's other ways because mosquitoes infected with West Nile virus can also infect dogs and chickens, for example. These animals do not get sick, but they do develop antibodies in their blood. So by checking the blood for antibodies, we can kind of try to track the virus and try to see if animals have been infected in the past. So we don't see any illness, but still we can kind of use these animals to try to monitor circulation of such viruses. And we can do the same, for example, in Japanese encephalitis virus, which is quite prevalent in Asia, mainly Southeast Asia. But you can also imagine that, for example, for Japanese encephalitis virus, pigs are amplifiers for this virus, and they do also show signs mainly in terms of abortions or mummified fetuses. So this can also have a great economic impact because farmers rely on the production they have with their pigs. So if such a virus circulates in their farm, that could have a lot of implications for their farming and their economic wealth. So to go to my PhD project, the main objectives were to determine a baseline seroprevalence. So seroprevalence means the number of animals or the percentage of animals that have antibodies in their blood against arboviruses in the Netherlands. And then I'm looking at companion animals such as horses and dogs, but also at wild boar. And then to develop surveillance and response protocols to kind of try to track these viruses in the country, and to look at perspectives in arboviral livestock impact, as I just explained with, for example, Japanese encephalitis, but also with Rift Valley fever, with regards to the change scenarios that I explained in the beginning. And why we do this, I tried to explain it a bit already, but when we look at the costs, for example, of zoonotic disease control, most of the time we see that these viruses, for example, circulate in wildlife. And first there is some exposure in animals. As I explained, not all of the animals get sick, but some, they do develop symptoms. And most of the time, then you see spillover to humans, and some humans may show symptoms and seek medical care. But most of the time, then the virus may have already been circulating for a while. So what we want to do is try to track the virus as soon as possible. Like in this picture, I would say most to the left of the picture as possible, to prevent morbidity and mortality in humans, but also in animals, and economic problems. So we can try to do that by track the virus itself or track antibodies in these animals. So factors to consider when designing such programs. This is all also very linked to the whole One Health concept, because we're dealing with a vector here that's also very much affected by climate and weather, by land use, but also when looking at, for example, the agricultural and the livestock husbandry practices, as I explained with Japanese encephalitis, for example, a lot of pigs in Southeast Asia that get symptoms, they're mainly like backyard farming. So they're roaming around in an area where there are also rice fields, for example, and these animals are outdoors. So they may have a bigger chance to get bitten by mosquitoes and therefore also to amplify the virus or get symptoms. In the Netherlands, on the contrary, a lot of animals are housed very much indoors. So it's very high biosecurity. This may mean that there's less of a chance for them to get infected, but now with the current situation of changing the whole livestock system and with regards to animal welfare, but also with regards to emissions and trying to downsize the whole livestock system, this may result in changes of animals going outside more often and therefore maybe increasing the chance of arbovirus circulation. So these are all kinds of things that we have to consider when thinking about developing such surveillance programs. And then, as we already talked about a bit, changes in climate, but also changes in landscape can really have an effect on especially vector-borne diseases, but also other zoonotic diseases because of the closer interaction, for example, between wildlife, livestock, and humans. And this is a picture that was a map that was developed by colleagues from Wageningen University on how the Netherlands could look like in 100 years. So you can see there's a lot more water, but also a closer connection between, for example, agriculture and nature areas. And when we look at the number of livestock in our country, that is quite high, and you can see it's quite concentrated. So you can also imagine that there are certain risk areas where these viruses may circulate instead of other areas where there's not so many animals. But it also means that you can only try to track these antibodies, for example, in certain areas because there's just more animals. And for the areas where you don't have a lot of animals, you should find other ways to try to track the virus. So to give an idea of what I do on a daily basis, there's one of my projects that I try to look for these antibodies in chickens. So what we did is there were 2 areas in the Netherlands where West Nile virus was detected in 2020. And for one of these areas, well, this is a picture of one of the areas, but we actually did it in both areas, looked for petting zoos and people with backyard chickens and tried to sample as many chickens as possible. Here you see Rodi with one of the chickens and me sampling chickens. We also took some eggs to see if we can find antibodies in the eggs. And in this way, we tried to see if the virus was really circulating in those areas. Then also I was interested in if mosquitoes do enter these livestock stables, because I was explaining that in the Netherlands, most of the livestock stables are quite close and there's quite high biosecurity. And in literature, I read that a lot of assumptions were made about that animals that are in free range system have a higher chance of getting infected or getting bitten by mosquitoes. So I sampled mosquitoes in a number of farms. And well, it looked like this. For example, on the outside of the farm, I placed a mosquito trap and also on the inside. And then I looked at mosquito counts per trap. And you can see in the graph, the 2 left, the blue and the orange graphs is one farm, and then the left was the inside trap, and the orange one was the outside trap, and then the same for the other 2 farms. The most right one was the free range chicken farm, and you can see that the percentage of mosquitoes also caught inside was the difference was lower because yeah, we think that it may be because there is a better exchange of air from inside to outside, so maybe mosquitoes could get into the stable more easily. And of course, this is a very small setup, so we cannot draw any conclusions here, but it was just to try to find out if mosquitoes do enter these poultry barns, and well, they do. So another thing that I'm doing is look at the knowledge level of horse owners, for example, about mosquito-borne viruses and related topics. And why we do that is because, as I said before, these horses are also used kind of as a sentinel, so as a warning system. So if they show symptoms, the owners must be aware that it could be a disease that should be notified to their veterinarian. So we try to ask them, like, in what cases do you call your veterinarian? And in this way, it could be easier to track the virus. If they don't call anyone, then nobody will know. So we asked around 320 horse owners about prevention measures, vaccinations, for example. And what was quite interesting, what was expected that we had a lot of female respondents, but they were quite highly educated, and almost 90% knew that it was possible to vaccinate their horse, but only 50% would consider vaccinating their horse. And this is useful information because then you can imagine that the willingness or the urgency doesn't seem so high for them. And almost 100% would contact their veterinarian if their horse showed neurological symptoms. So that's a nice thing, I think, because then you know at least that they would contact the veterinarian, and then we would hope that their veterinarian would notify if they have any suspicions on such viruses. So that's some of the things I do on a daily basis, and also how that links to the One Health concept. So I hope you find it interesting, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation, Kiki. I think it's very, very interesting to see what you did, and very diverse research too, from questionnaires to farm visits. And yeah, I think you have a very, very interesting project you're working on. Yeah, then a question to, I see Tangimo ask one. Yeah, are you work in Asia for Japanese encephalitis and also in other regions? What skill you are using for surveillance?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, our consortium is mainly focused on the Netherlands. So to be honest, I mainly look at the Netherlands, but of course, for example, the European Food Safety Authority, like there's European institutions that really on a daily basis track circulation of such viruses in other countries to make sure that if they have any signals that these viruses may come closer to Europe, that they will take action and they will do something about it. But I think it's important to highlight that even though our project is focused on the Netherlands, I really think that we should look at this more on a global scale. Also because as we've also seen, for example, with COVID, vaccine development for these kind of viruses sometimes doesn't go as fast as we maybe want. And we can maybe think about the fact that a lot of these viruses circulate in, for example, Asia or Africa. And as soon as these viruses enter like Europe or America, then you suddenly see this urgency because there's such a great economic and societal impact in the Western world. And then maybe this will all go faster. But yeah, in my opinion, that shouldn't be a reason to not start thinking about it already, because there's already a lot of morbidity and mortality and economic losses in areas like Asia, for example.
Yeah, I agree with that. I see Zoom user. you can put your question in the chat if you have any. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm also happy that we have a lot of nationalities in this call and our all global associations. So I hope indeed to create that awareness and those surveillance systems in other countries too. Yeah, then Tangimu had also a question: did the investments in these surveillance systems increase after COVID-19 in the Netherlands? So do you see developments there as, yeah, I think a good example of the risk associated? Yeah, did you see any changes in that?
Yeah, well, not necessarily in our project, but on a bigger scale, yes, because there's a lot of initiatives on pandemic preparedness all over the world. So we also see that in the Netherlands, especially because we have such a high human and animal density. I think it's crucial that also the Netherlands, but like all the countries, are prepared for something like this. So yeah, I think there's a lot more investments on pandemic preparedness and surveillance and zoonosis in general. So yeah, I think that's going on, and I think that's good. For example, we're also dealing with a big outbreak of avian influenza at the moment, which is quite a big problem. And there you see that there's a lot of surveillance going on because they have to track this virus, and yeah, it causes a lot of problems. So yes, we see an increase, but not necessarily for vector-borne diseases specifically.
See, all right. I see Yassine asked, what is the place of global warming in the One Health concept, also in your project? Yeah, we discussed it a bit earlier on, but maybe for your project, Kiki, you can answer it. And then for the others that have a question, I would say leave them in the chat, and Kiki can answer them in the chat. This will be the last question then.
Yeah, yeah, I think it has quite a big role. Well, global warming is of course a big term, but especially for vector-borne diseases, this obviously links very closely to the vector. And I'm not an expert in that, so maybe Rodi has better insight in that, and he can tell you something about it. But we see specific mosquito species going further north, for example. We see changes in water, which a lot of mosquitoes need to lay their eggs, so that changes yeah, the ability of these vectors to either be present or to spread viruses. So I think it has a big impact. But for the animals, because I'm mainly focused on the animal part, maybe not that much directly.
Yeah, maybe if I can add to that, then indeed what Kiki says is absolutely true. But in addition, you can also imagine that due to climate change, we change the way we shape our environment. So like now you see quite a bit of urban greening, for instance, and projects on rainwater retention and whatever. And that can also have an effect on vector communities and vector abundances. So not only does climate change can it have a direct effect on mosquitoes or vectors in general and vector-borne viruses, but also an indirect effect. So yeah, it's super complex actually, and I think that if you really want to do proper research on it, then you need data from on a very large temporal scale, because these changes with climate change go quite slow. So it's quite a challenge, I think.
Thank you very much for your insights, Rodi, and your presentation, Kiki. Yeah, then Rodi, I want to give you the stage then again to present on your research on citizen science for mosquito surveillance. So yeah, the stage is yours. I think I made you co-host. Oh no, I didn't. Yeah, I will make you co-host so you can share your screen.
All right, I assume you can all see my screen now.
We can see it.
Okay, well, I'm Rodi Blom. I'm a PhD candidate like Kiki, And I'm also in the same consortium as Kiki, the One Health Pact. I also work at Wageningen University, and here I am in the same research group as Emily, and we both work on vectors, and I will talk a bit about that. I will talk a bit about mosquitoes in general and my project. So, like I said, and I'm in the same consortium as Kiki, the One Health Pact. She already gave a very nice explanation about that. We are working together with a lot of different institutes, a lot of different PhD candidates, and we are all focusing on pieces of the puzzle that are related to arboviruses in the Netherlands. And then I am in the One Health entomology group, and here people are also working on these pieces of the puzzle, but maybe in a slightly different context. And what we focus on are host-vector interactions. So, for instance, the interactions between humans and mosquitoes, and animals and mosquitoes. And then there are people working on pathogen vector interactions. So some of my colleagues are studying which mosquito species can transmit specific viruses and how good they are at doing that. And then there are also there's some work being done on pathogen host interactions. I think now it's mostly linked to viruses in rodents. But regarding the vectors, we mainly study mosquitoes and ticks. Well, you can see them here. To the left, a mosquito. To the right, a tick. And I will talk a bit more about the mosquitoes. So what you see here is Culex pipiens. It's the common house mosquito. It's super abundant in the Netherlands and in Europe in general. It's the primary vector of quite a wide range of pathogens. For the Netherlands, the most important ones are West Nile virus, which Kiki already gave a very nice short introduction on. Another one is Usutu virus, which is quite similar to West Nile virus, but has a bit more of an effect on birds and less on humans. And then, for instance, there's also avian malaria, which also obviously is more linked to birds. So yeah, in order to really understand which role this mosquito plays in the arbovirus transmission and how these viruses and mosquitoes are distributed throughout the Netherlands, and to have an idea of what may happen in the future, it is important to study these animals. And one of the things that is necessary to do is to do field work on them, try to see where they are now, in which numbers they are there, and also maybe which viruses they carry. And all of that is then linked to the way the environment is shaped. Yeah, my research has a couple of research teams. I picked here the main ones. So like the first thing that I want to do is have collect baseline data on mosquito and mosquito-borne virus distributions. So that's basically just, like I said, have an idea on what's where. And then taking it a step further, I want to see which effects climate and land use have on these mosquito populations. And I'm not particularly talking about climate change here. It's mostly about the climate that we have now. So what I said earlier, to really study the effects of climate change, you need data over a large spatial scale, and within a PhD project, we don't really have time for that, unfortunately. One of the other things that I'm doing is looking at vector-host interactions. So which mosquitoes come into contact with which animals, which is something that's important because, well, as Kiki has also explained already, different vertebrate animals play different roles in virus transmissions. Something else that I am super interested in is the effect of seasonality, and I focus mostly on winter. And that's mainly because, well, mosquitoes are always associated with summer, and yeah, only a few people look at what happens in winter, but they don't just disappear. And the same goes for viruses; they don't just disappear. So yeah, what I want to know is like what happens during winter, and what is the role of mosquitoes in maintenance of viruses, for instance, in a certain area. So yeah, in order to do that, we need to do a lot of field work. So something that I have done, for instance, is in summer, I did weekly mosquito trappings throughout the Netherlands. I think if I remember correctly, it was at 16 locations. And this was, I think, a very nice example of a One Health approach. So even though I focus on mosquitoes, we did this sampling on sites where also bird surveillance was conducted, also by people within our consortium. So we really could keep an eye on which mosquitoes occurred there, which bird species we had there, and also everything that was collected there, both from the mosquitoes and the birds, was being tested on the presence of arboviruses. And in the end, we also used this data to look at the effects of land use and climate. I won't go into depth on that too much, but something that I want to show is that actually this surveillance system that we put into place led to the first detection of West Nile virus in the Netherlands. And well, the interesting thing was that we both found it in mosquitoes as well as birds, which really showed that this virus was circulating locally. So it wasn't just an infected bird that got here from abroad that popped up here and was sampled, and yeah, that's it. But we really showed that it was circulating locally. And even after this, other groups did human sampling, and they also found West Nile virus in people. So that really shows that this collaborative approach gave us an idea of where this virus was and also how it was circulating in these areas or in this area. And then, like I said, I do a lot of work on in winter. So what you can see here in this picture on the right is our two mosquitoes. So some mosquito species go into hibernation in winter, and before they do that, they eat a lot of sugar. They get fat. So the right one you see is a very fat mosquito, and then they just go into hiding spots, and then they stay there throughout winter, and then they re-emerge after winter, and then they start feeding again, and yeah, then they might play a role again in virus transmission. And also, one of the things that I want to see is, can we actually find viruses in these mosquitoes in winter? Because that may play a role in repeated outbreaks. Outbreaks always occur during summer, but it's quite kind of strange that it keeps occurring year after year. There must be some mechanism through which these viruses remain in place. And that could be mosquitoes. So that's something I'm looking into. Yeah, I will not talk too much about results or whatever. I just want to give a short overview of the things I'm doing and how this relates to One Health. So again, I am focusing on mosquitoes with this, but then there are also people that keep on sampling birds in winter to see if these birds are infected. So we really try to look for different pathways through in which these viruses can go through winter. So for that, I went to 2 areas which had viruses, which you can see here. And then the practical fieldwork looked something like this. So to the top left, you can see me sucking mosquitoes from the ceiling of a dirty cellar. And then on the bottom right, you can kind of have an idea of how many mosquitoes you can find in places like these. Yeah, it's crazy. So I think that it's probably even easier to find mosquitoes in winter than in summer. And then on the bottom left, you can also see one of my supervisors with his head down in a well, catching mosquitoes. So yeah, that's basically what a typical day for me looks like, crawling in these dark spaces and catching mosquitoes, just to get an idea of the ecology of these animals and how they play a role in viruses. And something else that I did is I did a citizen science project, which means that we involved the Dutch general public in our research. So like I said, some mosquitoes go into hibernation and they go to these dark areas and they stay there throughout winter, but also some mosquitoes go into people's houses in winter. And to collect those mosquitoes, you really need people to just smack mosquitoes in their houses and send them to me. And that was super successful, and it resulted in 6,000 mosquitoes. And I can use these to really get to study the effects of land use, for instance, so I can link certain submissions. I know where every mosquito came from, so I can link that to the area. I can look at HostVector interactions. I will go a bit more into depth on that later. And then I will screen them eventually also for the presence of viruses. Well, here on the pictures, you can see how successful it was. We really got bags full of mosquitoes. And on the bottom picture, you can see me and some colleagues, also Emily. We were unpacking all these mosquitoes, and well, it took months, but now I have a very nice collection of mosquitoes, which I can use for all these different types of analyses. So if you look at it on a map, it looks like this. You don't have to really record these mosquito names. Not that important. What I want to show here is that by doing this, you can really do research on a very large spatial scale. And each of these data points can be linked to a land use type, for instance, or urbanization. So by doing that, I can really see how the way we shape our environment has an effect on mosquitoes. And the last thing that I'm looking at is the vector-host interaction. So what you can see here in this picture are all blood-fed mosquitoes. So, well, I assume you all know that mosquitoes drink blood, and we can take that blood from the mosquitoes, do an analysis on that, and see where it came from. And by doing that, we can get an idea of which mosquitoes bite which type of animals. And again, this is important because, like Kiki said, these animals all play different roles in virus transmissions, and by understanding these interactions, we can get an idea of we get a better idea of how this virus transmission goes in. Well, I can't really say the wild because it's in people's homes, but how we can get a better idea of these interactions. Yeah, so here you have an idea of how many of these blood-fed mosquitoes I got. Might seem like not a lot, but it is quite a lot. So I can really use this amount of mosquitoes to identify these interactions. So coming back to the research goals of our group, or research teams of our group, I am really focusing on these host vector interactions and also on the pathogen vector interactions, but maybe not so much on how good mosquitoes are in transmitting them, but more on how they both might occur in the same place at the same time, and what role the mosquitoes play in these transmissions in the wild. And with that, I hope I gave you a bit of an insight on the in the type of work that I'm doing. And I would like to thank the people here. You can see my contact details here, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation, Rodi. And yeah, I remember that news story in the Netherlands that people were asked to send mosquitoes, and then a few weeks later, I got a push notification on my phone, stop sending mosquitoes to Wageningen because it were too many.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think
the initial plan was to leave it open for a month, but we had to close it after a bit more than a week because it was too overwhelmed.
Yeah, so in that sense, I think yeah, it was a big success. Yeah, I don't know if there are any questions from the public. Feel free to ask one to Rodi now or to Kiki. She's also still there, and Emily. I see Tegmo asks, what are the effects of land use on mosquitoes?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Well, it is actually a very broad question, so it's difficult to answer, to give a concise answer. But I can give an example. So one thing that we have seen in our study is that the interactions between climate and land use, well, there are differences in the interactions between climate and land use in different areas. So for instance, what we see is that urban areas react differently compared to some natural areas, in a sense that, wait, must explain a little bit different. The number of mosquitoes that we find in urban areas is affected differently by the climate than the number of mosquitoes that we find in natural areas, for instance. And one of the things that we think is happening is that, for instance, in urban areas, when it rains, there will be more puddles, there will be more water because the soil is impenetrable. There are more buildings that can catch water, and yeah, water will just stay there. Whereas in a natural area, water seeps into the ground, and it doesn't really change the environment. There won't be any more water bodies than usual. So it seems that, for instance, in urban areas, like some rain can have a larger effect and can really increase the number of mosquitoes, whereas that effect might not be as big in natural areas.
I see. Thank you very much for that. And interesting to hear that indeed in urban areas, then with puddles. Also, for me, it raises then the question: do we have to think about it in land use planning already? Then, like what the effects are on health, possibly. I see that Islam also asked a question: what kind of safety precautions do you employ when catching mosquitoes?
Well, not so many actually, because even though I am surrounded by mosquitoes in winter when I catch them, they aren't really active, so they don't bite me, usually. So I don't really take any precautions, also because the pathogens that we have currently in the Netherlands aren't, well, chances of being infected are super low. And if you get infected, then there's only a very small chance that you get ill. But something that I do actually is I do take precautions to make sure that my lungs stay a bit healthy. So I suck up these mosquitoes with an aspirator, and then I use an aspirator with a filter, for instance, because otherwise I will just get all kinds of stuff into my lungs that I don't want to have. But protecting myself from mosquitoes, no, that's not really something that I do. And also I think it's not really necessary at this point. It might change in the future when it could happen that maybe we get another pathogen, for instance, that's more dangerous. And then I think it is important to use precautions.
Let's see. All right, thanks a lot for your answers and insights. And yeah, those pictures look like a true adventure into those cellars. Yeah, Kiki, Emily, and Rodi, thanks that you could give these presentations and share insights around the One Health concept and your work there. I think it was very interesting to hear and learn about the concepts. I've learned myself a lot about this concept as a climate studies student and land and water management student. And I hope it broadens the scope of many of here today too. So for the second part of the program, we will brainstorm about projects around One Health between our two student associations. So please stay around for that. And Kiki, Emily, and Rodi, you are free to stay for the second part, but if you're also free to leave now. All right, then I would like to ask IPSF if somebody from IPSF is here to give a short presentation about IPSF. Yifan, good to see you.
Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen. So I'll just give a very brief introduction to IPSF, which stands for International Pharmaceutical Students Federation. We are the leading international advocacy organization for pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences students and recent graduates, and we promote improved public health through the provision of information, education, networking, and a range of publications and professional initiatives. So our mission is to improve public health by advancing the pharmacy practice and pharmaceutical science, responding to global challenges in health, health education, and workforce strategy, as well as serving as the global collective voice of students and recent graduates in pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences. So we are a non-governmental, non-political, non-religious, and nonprofit umbrella organization for pharmacy student organizations. We were formed in London in 1949, and now we have more than 500,000 pharmacy and pharmaceutical students and recent graduates from over 100 countries worldwide. And we have regional offices in the African, Asia Pacific, Eastern Mediterranean, European, and Pan American regions. Our head office is located in The Hague, the Netherlands, and this is a photo of the executives meeting back in 2019. And here are some of our allied organizations. We partner with the International Pharmaceutical Federation, as well as the United Nations, World Health Organization, UNESCO, UN ECOSOC. And here we also have IAS as one of our partners. So these are our main pillars of activity. So it would be pharmacy education, professional development, public health, student exchange, and policy and advocacy. In terms of pharmacy education, we hold regular webinars and also research opportunities so that our members can learn more through this pillar. For professional development, we have regular events where it's competitions and members can participate in patient counseling, compounding, clinical skills, and industrial skills. We also have training sessions for members who want to develop more professionally and also more leadership skills. And in terms of public health, it's a large portfolio. We have 21 program directors, and one of them is climate action, and the other one is One Health. So this is really relevant to us. And in terms of policy and advocacy, it's closely linked to our public health portfolio. We have released position statements, declarations, and we also attend high-level meetings such as the World Health Assembly and WHO executive meetings, and we have verbal statements there as well. One of our largest programs is a student exchange program. So every single year prior to COVID, we send about 1,000 students to go on exchange, and they would go to more than 80 associations worldwide, and they would experience the fields of practice, including community pharmacy, research, hospital pharmacy, and pharmaceutical industry. And the duration ranges from 2 weeks to 2 months. Here are our platforms if you would like to stay up to date with our activities and if you like to just follow us for more information. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yifan, and great that we could set this up together and have IPSF as a partner of EIS. I will also shortly introduce a bit about EIS for those joining from IPSF, and also if you're joining this but are not part of any of our associations, also feel free to stay around. We are happy to have you with us. Let me see. All right, seed chains grow together. EIS is also a student association and quite similar to the structure of IPSF in that sense. We have 10,000 students at 100 universities, more than 50 countries, and over 60 years of history. You can see at the bottom picture our first World Congress in Tunisia 65 years ago. Ever since we have grown and times have changed. No suits anymore, but t-shirts, and the World Wide Web for us to have these kind of meetings and stay in touch with each other. We are truly global. This is an old map. We are quickly expanding. I saw that Desiree is also there from Cameroon. Good to have you there. That's one of our new candidate members. And I'm in touch now with 11 new countries to open up a committee there. But if your country is not colored in at the moment, feel free to send a message, and I will be happy to be in touch with agricultural students in that country. What's our vision? To promote the exchange of experience, knowledge, and ideas, and to improve the mutual understanding among students across the globe. And we are truly global in that sense. Here you can see a picture of the delegation that went to the Less Climate Conference this Saturday. There will also, I will leave to Egypt, and we'll have again a very international group. And I think that's also what I saw with IPSF. I know IPSF will also go there. We also really try to make more and more use of science and those policy frameworks and papers. And I'm very happy that we are developing these too and have interesting conferences to really try to make a voice as young people. And I think our two associations can really find each other in there. And I hope we can continue that too. I know that for the antimicrobial resistance, we have also had in the past these collaborations. And yes, it fits EIS objectives too. So what else are we doing? We have an exchange program. It's over 62 years old, exchanged more than 20,000 students. You can check it out on our website. It gives you all kind of opportunities to go and travel to research institutes, to farms, and learn about other ways of doing things. And the Village Concept projects, that's one of the global projects EIS has, and One Health will become one other global project we have. And the Village Concept projects are really students that go back to their own communities and try to solve agricultural problems there. But I have, maybe you saw it on Instagram, but a nice example, for example, is EIS Indonesia, who has a committee that produces their own tea. There were a lot of floods, and they created a biopore system there, and they're now producing this tea brand. So we have EIS tea in that sense. These kind of projects are running across the globe, and I hope to expand those too, and also have that One Health approach in them, as we see how important it is. Now, women in agriculture, we will invest at the end of this year heavily in projects surrounding women in agriculture around that concept to make more equitable food systems, part of EIS agenda and everyone's agenda, as it should be. And then scientific events, so events like these, summits, conferences, EIS organizes, and you're all invited also to come to Wageningen and maybe to meet Kiki and Rodi in person here too, because we have a large conference in January, the International Conference for Youth in Agriculture. I will tell you a bit more about that soon. And we have all kinds of constitutional events in every region, but also on a global scale. This is the International Conference for Youth in Agriculture. The topic is not One Health, but it's around circular economy and rethinking waste. It will be held in the Netherlands from 17th to 21st of January. So I think a very nice way also to get in touch with students. And we had our World Congress in Morocco, and we'll have this yearly in the summer. So also for IPSF members, especially in countries where we're hosting it, would be nice to come pass by and meet us there. For the rest, we have countless of other projects, the Food and Agriculture Youth Institute, where we are making all kind of policy papers with. We are having our own podcast, Humans of EIS, where we tell stories about our members. We have also training committee, all kind of meetings with the exchange program. We go to climate conferences and other UN bodies, conferences, and we have all kind of competitions. So this is what EIS is doing, and I think it was important to share where IPSF is standing, where EIS is standing. So we all have an idea now as an IPSF member, but also as an EIS member, what the other association looks like. So for this part of the program, I think it's nice to get to know another member, an IPSF member or an EIS member, and get to know a bit the other association, and also think about ways we can work more together on this One Health approach that we just saw presented. So I've created the following questions. Let me see. This is here. So this is not the question I wanted to ask. This is the question I wanted to ask. So yeah, we will go into breakout rooms, not that long. I had planned around 20 minutes for this, but we will move into all the breakout rooms. So in case you in case there are not that many things going on, we will combine it. And we will discuss these kind of questions. So what do you think the concept of One Health is after this presentation? Do you think the concept of One Health is valuable for EIS or IPSF's existing projects? And how do you think IPSF and EIS can work together on the topic of One Health? I will also put them in the chat, but it would be great to reflect on these questions together and see, if there are rooms to work together. I will stop the recording for